encounters with predators, encounters with cats and chickens, free range chickens, and all sorts of non-tabletop hobby things today. Coming up today on Tabletop Alchemy. Encounters with predators and free range chickens and cats and all kinds of good food in today's vacation vlog. You gotta save the video now. You're gonna be in the opening of every video. Encounters with free range chickens and cats and predators. All on today's vacation vlog on Tabletop Alchemy. Greetings, good humans, and welcome to Tabletop Alchemy, where sometimes you get 2 pinch hit videos in a row. Where else can you find such awesome, consistent content? Anyway, time management is a thing that I'm lacking. I already mentioned that in last week's video, and it holds true today, and will probably hold true forever. And we thank our patrons for supporting videos like this. Oh boy. So this is one of those put me on in the background kind of things while you hobby, you know, like a podcast or just something to fill the dark, lonely corners of your hobbying basement area. Whatever. Just put me on back there with the donuts and let me ramble, and maybe, you know, you'll get something done. Something that's important. I really wasn't planning to talk about this vacation that I went on, but it was pretty cool. So I guess I'm just going to blather about that for a while, and you can find something else interesting to watch on YouTube and wait for next week's video that might have some tabletop hobby stuff in it. There are some weird videos coming down the line just because of what I'm working on and things like that. So yeah, the tabletop part of this channel is getting a little thin in the coming months here. It'll be back. It's just, there's ebbs and swells of things. Do I know what I'm saying? No, I don't. Is this stuff on the teleprompter? Absolutely not. So, my daughter and I went on vacation, and it was pretty fantastic for me, anyway, and it's not going to probably mean much for you, but, you know, there it is. And like I always try to do, you know, I try to tie every video into the hobby somehow, just a little bit, and I did find some hobby inspiration along the way on the vacation. Just a production note, I did not take a camera with me on the trip, other than my phone. I mean, because I didn't want to waste a lot of time filming an experience rather than experiencing an experience. So, you know, my B-roll for this video is lacking at best. And there we are. Welcome to Tabletop Alchemy. If you're new here, you're probably already clicking off, so it doesn't really matter. And if you're hanging out, I hope you're working on something of value to you in the hobby on your hobby desk while I ramble like a madman in the background with his chicken shirt on. This will become relevant very soon. So we went to Hawaii for a week. Now, neither of us had ever been there, and I've wanted to go someplace tropical, or at least tropical adjacent, for at least the last 30 years. I mean, I've never been to a tropical place, and it's just something I've wanted to experience without going to Florida. Now, we went to a single island for the whole trip. We went to Maui, and we saw quite a bit of the island, geographically speaking. But, you know, you'd need like a month to see, you know, everything that's worth seeing, and that's not counting just the hours you might want to spend just sitting in the environment. You know, at least that's something I thoroughly enjoyed, was just sitting, just being in the environment that was just so different from what I'm used to. Air temperature is going to be a running theme here. Some key things I noticed as an overall part of the experience. If you've been to Hawaii, this is all, you know all this already. My apologies. First off, I would categorize going to Hawaii as going to Disneyland on hardcore mode. It's like it's full of all these areas and things that we've seen in movies and amusement parks, you know, try to recreate in that amusement park fashion, right? Like a super simple example of how real life is real versus the, you know, stage or amusement park version might be, is like how on a lot of the beaches we went to, which of course all the beaches are gorgeous, right? Like, duh. I mean, it's Hawaii, of course they are. But a lot of the beaches are sandy going into the water, but then there are a lot of, basically, I guess, lava rocks that form the seafloor under the water at the edges of the sand. And the way the surf comes in and goes out, you can be in either like 4 or 6 feet of water, and then suddenly you're in a foot of water. And you put your feet down, and lava rocks are not comfortable to slam into or walk on, for that matter. It was just that realization that, yeah, this is a beautiful beach, but it takes some effort to, to enjoy. Not all the beaches are like that, but it's just a thing. I don't know if it's a big thing. It was just a thing that I noticed. Anyway, a few of those bullet points that I mentioned 5 minutes ago. 1, there is no seaweed on any of the beaches we went to. Now, I don't know if that's the case island chain wide, so to speak, but my beach here in California is just full of seaweed, and it is a stark difference in how nice a beach is when it's full of seaweed or has no seaweed. Sorry. What are you doing? A beach without seaweed is really very nice. And, maybe that has a bit to do with how unsmelly the beaches were there. The air on the island was super clean and fresh. And I thought I lived in an area with clean, fresh air, and I do not. Not compared to those islands, anyway. Number 2, there are no seagulls in Hawaii. We actually Googled that to confirm it once I noticed it, and apparently seagulls do not like those islands. Like, there's no place for them to nest or something. And living near a beach with seagulls all over the place, that was a stark difference that I noticed. I don't mind seagulls. I mean, I guess that's just another mark towards the pristineness of the beaches over there. No seaweed, no seagulls. Number 3, the air temperature is pretty much like how everyone says it is. It's constantly very nice. Every time I leave the hotel room to go out at night or in the early morning when, visually it's dark outside, and, you sort of have an ingrained preconceived notion that it's going to be, a touch chilly outside when it's dark or whatever. And every time I'd walk outside, I was just like hit with the idea that, oh yeah, it's warmer out here than it is like in the hotel room, which is comfortable as well. And it was just nice. Now, they definitely have weather patterns that shift like every 10 minutes, and it can rain for 5 minutes, and then the sun's back out and it's hot. And yes, they have all these, shifting microclimates, but overall, the air quality and temperature was just kind of unnervingly consistent. Now, in direct sunlight, the sun was hot, like no doubt. Like some of the days it got up to 82, 85 degrees in the direct sun. And, if you stand in the shade or, sit in the shade, there was almost always a nice little breeze, or even if there wasn't, it was just like always perfect in the shade. Now, of course, I haven't been there in their summertime, but from what I understand, the weather doesn't change too much. It might go up 5-10 degrees or whatever, but generally speaking, it was as wonderful as you would imagine it would be. Anyway, number 4, the seafood is probably the freshest I've personally ever had. Obviously, living somewhere, near where fishing is right outside, seafood's going to be good. But yeah, easily my favorite thing to get there for a meal was poke. Now, I love sushi, and if you find a good sushi restaurant, you usually remember it, right? You're like, oh, that place is really good. We'll make a note of that one. But that said, there's a lot of poke places here in the South Bay where I live, and I don't like hardly any of them. But in Hawaii, the poke was so fresh, it was just like a different thing altogether. It was awesome. And am I talking about food right now in a tabletop hobby video? Yes. I don't care, man. It was good. Anyway, we arrived on Maui at around 11:30 a.m. island time on a Monday. And so my daughter and I were like, hungry for lunch or whatever. And my daughter, being in her age group or generation or whatever, she pulled a lot of recommendations from Reddit. And Reddit told her that we needed to get poke from a supermarket called Foodland. And I was like, dude, we just flew 3,000 miles across the Pacific Ocean, and we're going to go get raw tuna from a supermarket? She insisted that we try it because of the Redditors all saying that we should try it. And we needed to go to a store anyway to get a few supplies like, sunscreen and bottled water, etc. So we went to Foodland, and we found the little fish store. It's kind of like its own little store inside the bigger supermarket. And it's kind of like deli style, right? We were able to order a couple of 4-ounce containers of different styles of poke, and got a couple of scoops of rice to go with it. And we drove down a random road to a little state beach sort of place. It was all rocks, not really any sand in this particular spot, which was all just a few minutes from the airport in the main city there. And we sat on some rocks and ate what turned out to be the best poke we'd ever had. It was super good. It was cool. It was like the clouds were rolling in, so it wasn't super sunny, but it didn't matter to me because looking back the other way, there's some of the houses that were behind us, and it's just like behind them is the big rise of the, I guess, the volcanic, the mountain volcano sites or whatever, but they're all green and there's mist back there, and, it's just not, mist and greenery is not something that I get to see every day because I live in the desert. As much as Southern California would like you to believe it was not a desert, it is a desert. We then headed out to our hotel, which was the Papakea Resort Hotel thing on the west side of the island. It's actually right next to Lahaina. I believe I'm pronouncing that right, but I could definitely be pronouncing that wrong, and I might pronounce every Hawaiian word in this video incorrectly. I want to apologize in advance for that. I wasn't there long enough to really grok the pronunciations of things. Anyway, Lahaina was where the gnarly fires hit last year. So we saw a lot of reconstruction work going on, but the hotel was really very nice. And I was pretty surprised because it was not super expensive, at least at this time of the year. I mean, this whole trip happened because I saw that plane tickets were $250 round trip. And I was like, we can go to Hawaii and come back for $250. Like, that's crazy. We got to take advantage of that. So we did. Anyway, the hotel is, like I assume most of the hotels on the island, it was right on the coast, of course. Now, the Papakea doesn't actually have its own beach. It has maybe like a 6-foot tall seawall that the water crashes right up to. But at the hotel next door, which is like a sister hotel, there is a beach that's available to residents of both hotels, so we could use that. And in the Papakea section, there are these stairs every so often that just go right down into the ocean, essentially. And while they don't recommend you walking around out there, everything seemed to be sort of at your own risk. Like there were just all these signs that were like, yeah, here's a beach, you can swim at your own risk. So at one point, I did walk along that seawall from the beach area to these stairs, and it was treacherous and fun. Because the water is so clear and you can see, I don't know, it is pretty wonderful over there, obviously. We all know that. I'm just here to say that I went and experienced it, and it's true. Most of those things are true that we hear about Hawaii. So, speaking of the water, I will say that I have always heard that the water is warm and it's awesome. And I was expecting, like warm water. But apparently my idea of warm is not everyone else's idea of warm. It was definitely warmer than, say, the water here at like Redondo Beach or Hermosa or Malibu. But it was definitely not like bathwater warm, which is what I want. Now, the water here where I live is basically too cold for me to swim in comfortably, even in the hottest months of summer. I mean, that's like the only time I could even remotely think about going in the water, when it's like 100 degrees out a few days in the summertime. But in Maui, the water was just on the comfortable side of crisp and refreshing, I guess. And if the sun was out and not behind a cloud or something, it was truly refreshing, and I did more ocean swimming in the last 5 days than I've done in the last 35 years. Anyway, day 2 was our full reel-on adventure day. Now, we didn't know it was going to be a full-on adventure day, but it certainly developed that way. And my producing partner, Brad, had brought his family out to Maui a couple of years ago, and he got caught driving on something called Death Highway or Divorce Highway. And he had told me about that experience, and that was the only thing I had told my daughter. I was like, hey, I don't care, whatever you want to do, I'm down to, do whatever you want to do, see whatever you want, but we just, maybe we should just avoid this death highway thing. Let's just maybe not do that. Anything else? Super cool, right? And she asked me if there's anything in particular that I wanted to see or do, and I really didn't have anything in mind. I mean, if I had gone on this trip on my own, I would have literally just sat at like one beach by the hotel like every day, just contemplating the ocean and soaking up the tropical air. But when she asked me, I said, well, one thing I would enjoy seeing is something that's like in the jungle or some kind of waterfall thing, waterfall in a rainforest. I really wanted to see that. Come on, Indiana Jones. So she found a place and worked out a trip route and used Reddit to sort of help plan the trip route and found us a place for breakfast along the way because she was like, hey, we're not going to eat at the same place more than once on this trip, which is, good on her for doing that. That's the appropriate way to do things. It's not how I would have done things, but she's an actual traveler kind of person where I'm like, man, we could just keep going to Foodland. I'll be fine. So we took off on the second day and headed into the center of the island for breakfast, and we had omelets and a giant breakfast bagel and strawberry pancakes at Grandma's Coffee House, which had its own unique feature, that being they had no public restrooms. Of course, I needed to use a restroom, and so I went next door to the gas station, which also had no public restroom, and all of these businesses were just saying, no, we don't have public restrooms. You need to go up the road half a minute to the public park, and there are public restrooms there for all you tourists. Okay, so we did go use those public restrooms. There, you could see it, and we were next to a car full of octogenarians who got out of their car and were all verbally expressive about how disappointed they were with the not having public restrooms at the restaurants. Not all the restaurants were like that. It was just this little particular spot, whatever. So then we headed down the road toward this waterfall hike that is actually on the southeast corner of the island. So like all the way across the island from where we were staying, and 4-lane roads just don't seem to be a thing on Maui outside of the main city areas where you've got like some good, decent traffic, I guess, right? But like going across all these like empty areas across the island, all the main highways are basically 2 lanes, and the speed limits are all like 45 miles per hour or under. In a lot of places, the speed limits are more like 30 miles per hour. And I think it's because the roads are 2-lane and they're also very curvy. They're windy, right? You're going around hills and following a coastline. So we're driving out and the road is pretty windy, and we're up on this sort of, I guess, like the hillside of the main, I guess, volcanic slope, and there are farmhouses and not much traffic. And in fact, the further we drove, the less traffic we saw, and there started to be like cattle crossing signs, and every once in a while we'd pass an abandoned car that had been rolled off a cliff because there were lots of steep hillsides and ravines and stuff, and apparently it's just too expensive to, I don't know, to have a car towed across an island, so they just dump the cars. I don't know. Anyway, we keep driving and the terrain starts to get really dry. I mean, we were traversing the dry side of the island at this point, and it really did not look like my perception of Hawaii at all. I mean, look at this. It looks like Montana or something, right? I mean, it's just big, giant slopes of lava rock and dry grass, basically. But I mean, all that said, it was still like sort of an impressive place to be. And the road we're on eventually drops down to 1 lane. And I was like, uh-oh, I think we might be on one of those 2 highways we're not supposed to be on. Like when it becomes a 1-lane road and you have to like stop or pull over onto the edge of a road that has no shoulder to pull over onto to let like another car pass, and the wind is like 70 miles an hour, it was getting a little freaky. So we stopped at this spot here because we could see that the road was going to get even tighter, and I was like, hold on, let me get out here, let's take a break, let me have a cigarette, and let's decide if we want to keep going. So we got out, we walked around on that bluff right there, and again, the wind was crazy, and we were looking, the air was super clear, so we're looking down back the way we came. There's no cars out there's no cars the other way, but you could just see the road getting just tiny and like windier, and we're just like, I don't know. We kind of debated back and forth, and then we just decided to keep going. So we can always turn around and go back, right? And I kept thinking while we're driving down these tighter and tighter curves, I was like, man, this is gonna be real fun coming back through this stuff at night. Anyway, so we're going ahead, we're going still east on the road, and at some point there are farms start to appear again. First there was like nothing out there on the bluffs, and then some farms started to appear, and the road, it's like they just stopped paving it. They just like forgot about the road at some point. It's like, no, there's no more, I don't know, it's no more paving. It eventually just got to the point where I was like, oh, this is why people rent Jeeps instead of Nissan Altimas. here on Maui. But one very cool thing that we observed as we were driving through all this craziness was we drove through a transition from the dry Montana steppes into lush rainforest farmland, and it was like going through a biome change in a video game, because it literally happened over the course of like a mile. And then suddenly we were actually in steep mountain jungle terrain, like full on classic rainforest stuff. And we're driving on this one lane road along cliffs that drop off into the ocean. And at one point, I think the most dangerous thing we came across was a full on power line was just draped across the road because the pole had just like given up, and it had just leaned over, and we had to sort of drive around it. It was like hanging about 3 feet over the road, and the hood of the car just kind of barely skated underneath it. And I was like, that's pretty dangerous, right? Like a full-on power line just laying across the road. Anyway, it was pretty hairy. But then we crossed this one spot, and there were all these giant work trucks on the other side of this little bridge area that we went across. And we're driving across this bridge, and then there's a giant road sign, like a big work road sign. It's got to be 8 feet tall, and it's completely blocking the road in front of us. And it's just tweaked a little bit so we could kind of drive around that sign, so we're looking at the back of the sign. So we get around it, and we look in the mirror, and we look back, and the sign says, it's huge. It says road closed. So the road that we were driving on was closed. It just wasn't closed on the other end where we started from. Anyway, so that little area was pretty close to where our destination was, which was I'm going to mess up the pronunciation, the Waimoku Falls Trailhead, which starts at the Kipahulu Visitor Center. When we pulled up to the park rangers at the parking lot gate to, pay for the day pass or whatever, I asked the ranger if the northbound road was any easier than the incoming eastbound road we just driven. Because I was like, is it possible for me to not go back that way? That would be wonderful. And the park ranger just laughed at us. And she was like, yeah, no, you can't even go back that way because that road is closed. You're going to drive north through a place called Hana, and it'll be better. And it was better, but only a little bit. We'll get to that. Anyway, we got to this place where the trailhead was. This is the waterfall hike that my daughter had found for us to do. And it was a 2-mile one way. So it's a 2-mile hike up into the jungle, up into the cliffs and stuff, and 2 miles back, of course. So it's a 4-mile round trip hike up into the rainforest to the Waimoku Falls. It was about as difficult or strenuous as I can probably handle at my age, which is to say that it wasn't bad for normal people. Just for me. In fact, a good portion of it is actually sort of paved with these fiberglass platforms that cut through an entire bamboo forest. And that was pretty cool. Like, you get to, half of the hike is really going through literally a bamboo forest. It was awesome. I really, really enjoyed experiencing that. Like, it's where else am I going to, I don't know. I've never been in a bamboo forest like that. And of course, the waterfall that we're hiking to is coming down from way up high and then running through like all these rapids and pools and pretty lively, small, like, I don't know if you call it, it's not really a river, but it's not really a stream. It's whatever's in between that. And it's that that rushing water was like all alongside most of the hike down in these deep ravines. And the hike crosses back and forth over these, with pedestrian bridges that go over these ravines. And it was an awesome environment. It was literally like being in the real world version of some kind of Disney, Tom Sawyer Island kind of a thing. It's just, which is my only experience up to going to this real thing. And it was awesome. And there were a lot of signs that were like, hey, I don't know if I got a picture of this one, so I don't know if I could show it, but there was like a sign in one spot that said, hey, fatal drop, do not step beyond this sign. And we went up to the sign and we looked over the edge, and yes, it was like an inverted drop, but you would never see it because of all the foliage and stuff. So you could just be walking through there thinking you're going down a hill, and all of a sudden you'd be down at the bottom in the crashing rapids. But yeah, it was pretty nuts. Anyway, you get to walk under this crazy banyan tree, which is, this tree is nuts, right? I mean, this is a straight up Dungeons and Dragons tree. I mean, look at this thing. It grows its own supports. Like, it puts out like these, its branches go way out horizontally, and then it's like, we need to grow a support right here. So it like grows its own supports. It was nuts. And then of course there's the waterfall itself. I mean, there's like multiple waterfalls, and even though you've hiked 2 miles up into this kind of like cul-de-sac of volcanic mountain, I don't know how high up we were after the hike to this point from sea level, but then I don't know how high up the waterfall is or the tops of these cliffs that my phone camera is just not capable of showing the scale of this canyon cul-de-sac we're in. I mean, those walls must have been 20 stories tall. I mean, maybe they were higher. But yeah, you could like hang out at this topmost part. There's a sign that says you can't go any farther for fear of death or injury. Those seem to be pretty common all over this hike. When you see the picture, it just looks like you're looking at a hill and there's a waterfall there. But you have to realize that my camera is pointed almost vertically straight up. It's just hard to get that across in the footage. And it was just awesome because you look up and you pan around and there's multiple waterfalls coming down and they're just crashing down, and you're standing next to a big, rapids area where the river's going by and tumbling down and going down more ravines. And it was awesome. It was very, very cool. And this is me at the end of a 4-mile hike. That's what I look like. I collapse on the ground and lean against the car, smoke a cigarette. I had to sit down and rest for like 15 minutes. 4 miles is a lot. I do pull-ups and push-ups in the morning. I do my little rowing machine for 20 minutes. Hiking 4 miles is a staggering achievement. After that awesome experience, we then got back in the car and we drove to Hana, which that stretch of road it's super windy. It's very, very curvy. And every time there's a bridge crossing, like a ravine, the bridges are only wide enough for one car. So you always have to look for oncoming traffic and who decides who's going to stop on either side of the bridge and let the other one cross. But at the same time, this drive is entirely in the rainforest, misty jungle terrain. And it's all vertical because you're driving it's hard to describe what it is. You're just in these canyons is kind of the wrong word, but it gives the right impression or the right feel because you're just, I guess, on the sides of crazy steep slopes that are just jungle-fied and then every time the bridge you cross and then there's water. Anyway, it's just awesome. It was incredibly cool. But the road was incredibly stressful to drive on, even though the terrain and everything was super awesome. And at one of the like rest stop bathroom places, we only passed one on the road to Hana, or we stopped at this rest stop area and we met this guy. He was just this stray that looks like he's run with the Rangers of Shadow Deep Squad for the last decade. I mean, he seemed like he was half blind. I don't know if he's missing an eye, but he's obviously a survivor. And the way he kind of came up and posed for this picture he's just so cool. I wanted to take that cat home. He just seemed like, you put up with quite a bit in life, buddy. You need a nice, chill vacation spot where you can just lay down in an apartment and soak up the sun. Felt super bad. We didn't have anything to feed him. All we had was like macadamia nuts in our snack bags at that point. But I don't know. He was just super cool. So then we drove that road to Hana and to a couple other spots we stopped at. And I don't have any footage of that drive that I was just describing because of just how harrowing the drive was. It was as harrowing as the previous section of driving that we had done, but there was a lot more traffic and it was just full of hairpin turns, and some of those turns literally maxed out the turning radius of that Altima that we had rented. And there were locals on that road that just were not having it. They were driving crazy fast on those blind curves, and it was a mental exercise and concentration to get through that jungle. And it took it took hours at 25 and 30 miles per hour to get all the way out of that whole area. I wish I had a video of it, but again, we were just preoccupied with trying to stay alive and appreciate the incredible terrain that we were in. There were a lot of those single car width bridges, and at every one of those there was a waterfall with rapids charging down the ravines. And I think in the summer I would have tried to stop and like just get out and like climb down the roadside and try to get in some of those waterfalls. That would have been fantastic. Every bit of it looked like a scene out of a movie or a storybook. It was awesome. Now, by the time we made it back to our hotel, it was like 6:30 p.m. The sun had gone down, and we just racked out. And from that point on, we pretty much slept 10 hours a night, going to bed a little after sundown and getting up around 6:30 or 7 a.m. to start the day or whatever. I slept on the Murphy bed in the hotel room, which was in the sort of living room area, which was actually the whole spot that we stayed in. They were all like 1-bedroom apartments, and they had like full kitchens and everything. And we would just leave the sliding glass doors to the balcony just open all night. And I just slept with the ocean crashing outside and the warmer air coming in through the screen there. It was just epic. Now, the next day I went to this little place we'd seen right around the corner from the hotel, which sold pizza and cinnamon rolls, apparently, because that's what the sign said. And, cinnamon rolls are probably my favorite form of pastry. So I decided I just had to get one from this hole-in-the-wall pizza place. I kind of didn't think they would be very good because I was like, I don't know, they just sell pizza and cinnamon rolls, but maybe they make cinnamon rolls from the pizza dough. That could be good, right? I'll give it a shot. I'll go over there. I went over there at 7 in the morning, right at 7 when they said they opened. And I show up and there's a 30-minute waiting line in the parking lot. So I was like, okay, apparently these things are famous, so they should be pretty good. And they were. And they were also huge. Each cinnamon roll was like the size of dinner plate, and they were worth the wait. Anyway, I digress. Now, day 3 was time to pick up the snorkel gear my daughter had rented online. So we did that, and we went snorkeling in a city called Kihei, which is where my shirt is from. I'm actually wearing this shirt backwards. Because I bought this shirt because I saw the badass rooster on the rack. They had it up showing that. And I was like, that's so cool. I love that design because there's just a lot of free range roaming chickens around and roosters. They were just cool. And I was like, that's an awesome shirt. And I got that. And then once I took it home, I realized, oh, that's the back. This is the back of the shirt. So I'm wearing my shirt backwards because I got talent. This is the shirt that my daughter picked out, and I kind of wish I had bought that shirt as well because it is super cool too and very funny. Anyway, snorkeling is pretty fantastic. Now, obviously everyone who snorkels says that, so this is common knowledge. I've never really done it, other than with, like a little cheesy Walmart snorkel in a swimming pool or something as a kid, but doing it with real gear in a real ocean was awesome. At first I was like, I'm probably not gonna like this at all. It's a bunch of gear you got to put on. I'm always kind of like, I don't know if I want to put out the effort to do all this stuff. But as soon as I put my mask in the water, I was like, oh, this is awesome. Now, my daughter, she just took off. She had the fins on. She started snorkeling and just swam away. Just swam out down the ocean looking at things. Now, this particular spot we were at, it didn't have too much to actually see. It had a lot of sand, like not a lot of lava rocks in the area that I was at. Had a lot of sand running pretty far out, and there were a few fish, just like 1 or 2 here or there. And my daughter actually swam so far down the beach that she actually found a reef and had a good time swimming around that. But I was just like hanging out, like kind of trying to stay in line with where we put our stuff on the beach. I was snorkeling there, and that's when I encountered, briefly, a shark. Not a huge shark. My guess is he was maybe about 4 feet long or so, and it just sort of like arced out of the deep part in front of me, kind of close to the bottom, and it just sort of swam like toward and then away from me in this sort of, an arc. It just kind of arced toward me and away, and I was sort of stunned. And I was like, I popped up out of the water, and I was like, and my daughter happened to have swum back at that point. So she was there, and she was now on her boogie board, which we brought from the hotel. And I was like, no one's going to believe me, because there were like other people out, here in the water hanging out, just having fun and stuff. And I was like, I don't, do I say something? Do I tell somebody that I just saw a shark? I mean, it wasn't like a big, like it was not like a tiger shark or something like that. And I was pretty confident from the size of it that it was like a juvenile shark. I don't know if any of this matters. Like, maybe it doesn't matter at all, but it definitely wasn't like a big shark, right? I just really didn't know what to say. But I told my daughter, I was like, I just saw a shark. and she's like, so she was like, oh, wow, that's crazy. And then she just kept paddling out on her boogie board. I was like, no, that's where the shark went. It went out there where you're going, but I don't know. Anyway, later on, I found out by chatting with a local that they have a lot of like white tip reef sharks and some other smaller sharks that are typically like they're so docile that the locals call them golden retrievers, because they just hang out and are not known to attack anything human wise. They just sort of swim around with the other fish. And I was like, okay, at least that sort of justified to me that I had seen what I thought I'd seen. And we looked up some pictures of the white tip reef sharks, and I'm pretty sure that's what I saw. It was probably a juvenile to growing up, almost adult sort of size reef shark. And apparently was not dangerous, which is good, but it was super, it was shocking to me to see it. Oh boy. And then in Kihei, we had the best poke from a food truck that we'd ever had. It was so good that I kind of insisted that I get to eat at that food truck one more time before we left the island. Now, this is the Aloha Prime Eatery food truck. I highly, highly recommend it if you're in Maui or whatever. It was in this very cool little park area. It's got all these food trucks that are arranged. They're kind of permanent installations in there. Super nice, plants, everything to walk around in. And there's like a big park area where they do, I guess they do like the hula dancing and the fire dancing, all that stuff at night. There's a big nursery there for plants that sell plants and stuff. And there's chickens running around. And, it was a very nice little area. It was very cool. Anyway, that's where we got shirts and stuff. And also where I got one of the best lattes I've ever gotten, flavor-wise, from kind of anywhere. And it was just a regular latte, espresso and whole milk. And whatever this Lava Java Roasters does to their coffee, it's just smooth and not bitter, and just, it was really good. And like a complete dummy, I failed to purchase any of their whole roasted beans to bring home. I just now went and looked them up online because I was like, dude, can I get this again? And they are out of stock on all of their non-flavored roasts. Anyway, Kihei was very fun. It's obviously a town, a city, and so it's crowded, has all the city stuff, whatever. But it was a very cool area. And then was day 4, and day 4 was another snorkel time day. But the weather actually turned chilly for the first time. Not like really chilly, just sort of windy and rainy and cloudy. Which it did kind of clear up towards the afternoon. But again, I like the cloud cover quite a bit. The direct sun is very hot, But there was a brief, like 30-minute bit where we were walking out on this bluff over the ocean. We were like kind of taking this trail out where you could supposedly look down on all these bays, and it just like became super windy. The rain became horizontal in the wind, and it was like 40 degrees all of a sudden, just like that. And it was, we were not dressed for that. But I also now understand why the rainbows on the Hawaiian license plates make absolute sense. You see rainbows constantly on the island. I mean, it was pretty crazy. Full double rainbows, partial rainbows, rainbows here and over there all at the same time. Just beautiful stuff. This time we snorkeled closer to the hotel, and it was actually this little bay that was full of reefs under the water, full of like coral reefs there. And we actually saw all kinds of fish. This was like the classic snorkeling experience. My daughter actually saw a pair of Hanu sea turtles. They swam like right up to her, even though, we all know we're supposed to stay like 15 feet away from them if you can, but they like surprised her. They swam up from behind her, and they were like 12 inches away from her. She almost like kicked one on accident. She didn't. but she was like surprised by them. And yeah, so she got to swim with 2 sea turtles, and I snorkeled for so long that eventually I had to stop because my internal core temperature got cold enough over time that my teeth were involuntarily chattering, and I couldn't maintain the seal on the snorkel mouthpiece. But that was an awesome session in the water. It was super fun. Anyway, that night we hit another food truck park, and my daughter tried Loco Moco, which I guess is the local dish, it's basically like a hamburger patty or prime rib in this case on top of rice with dark gravy on it, all topped with a fried egg. I tried it. It was pretty good. I got a plate of Kahlua pork, which is just barbecued pork and rice, and a little side of poi. I have wanted to try poi for 40 years because at some point when I was a kid, like 10 years old or something, I read a book that, like a storybook that was about a kid growing up, way back in like, I don't know, maybe, who knows what the year time frame was, I don't know, 1600s or something, whatever. About a kid growing up on the islands, and the author described how they mashed poi out of, I guess basically it's just mashed taro root. And I just wanted to try it. It was good. It was kind of like cold cream of wheat with a tartness to it, I guess. And it's purple, naturally colored. But it was good. I didn't dislike it. And I'm very glad I tried it. I don't know. We did some other stuff that day, of course. There's too many things to talk about. Day 5 was our last day, and we had to check out of the hotel at 11 a.m., but we didn't fly out until around 8 p.m. because we wanted to make sure, we maxed out our time on the island, right? And so we went back to Kihei that last day. Specifically, we went back to a beach called McKenna Beach, which is in the Wailea McKenna State Park area, which we gathered was a pretty touristy area, and for good reason. The beaches there are just gorgeous. Now, the McKenna Beach that we went to was past all the main tourist area, and you kind of go down this windy road again, but it's not super crazy. You kind of go through all this very high end living area, this is like the sort of the Beverly Hills area of the island, it appeared to us. But you kind of drive through there, keep going, and then it becomes more like sort of rustic or more just sort of wilderness out there. There are some larger estates, but the road is like, there's no more sidewalks, stuff like that. And you kind of just pull off the road at a certain point. There's big shoulders, big dirt, edges on the road there. And there are big state park entrance, like driveways or whatever, dirt road sort of entrances. And you just pull over to the side, climb out your car, and walk down through the trees, and there are these series of small bays. And the beaches there, again, they were beautiful. And we had gone to this McKenna Beach the previous evening and watched the sun go down there, and I really liked that spot. And I was like, well, we got to kill some hours and stuff. Let's go there again. And we can hit the Aloha Prime food truck for some more poke. And I got another latte at Lava Java, and then we went to the beach itself. And this was probably the biggest bummer of the whole trip. It was the most perfect day during our stay for ocean swimming. Out of all the days that we'd been there, it was broad sunlight, so it was very hot that day. It was like 85 degrees, and then the direct sun was just hot, and the water felt fantastic. We stepped in it there at that beach, and we couldn't go swimming. That was the big bummer. It was the perfect day to just spend hours in the water with the just beautiful all the stuff, and we couldn't go in there because we realized after we got there that we didn't have any towels. We were going to have to return the rental car in a few hours, and we just weren't keen on swimming, and then not having, or then having to go to the airport without being able to shower anywhere. And it was just kind of a bummer for us, but because it was just so beautiful that day. Anyway, my daughter kind of went out walked amongst at the edge of the beach. There are a lot of like sort of little tide pools created by the rocks and stuff. And I sat underneath this tree that you see in the picture here, and the air was, again, like 75 degrees in the shade. And it was just so perfect, so awesome. So I just sat in the shade, watching the water for an hour. Then we packed up and hit the airport and headed home. Now, obviously, there are lots of other things that we did, little experiences I could expound upon. But this video that has nothing to do with tabletop gaming already is ridiculously long. And, that reminds me. So here is my little gaming tie-in thing. Now, at that McKenna Beach, there was this rock sticking up out of the surf, and it looks like 3 little towers. Now, maybe they're about like 3 feet high in the water. They're just off the edge of the surf. And the previous day that we'd been there for sunset, during which I didn't even have my phone with me to take any pictures, I was just sitting on the beach. We were just hanging out, watching the sun go down. It was kind of a gray day. Nobody was really in the water. And I saw those 3 rocks, and I was just instantly hit with this Dungeons and Dragons inspiration for a setup or a part of a world or something. I was just hit with this idea of 3 fortresses or castles built on these 3 rock spires that jut up out of the ocean. And maybe there were like 3 queens that were sisters that each had a castle there. They were like, they're all like descendants of a pirate king that took over this spot. And maybe in the middle of these 3 rock spires, there's some kind of like magic well or something that they're all sort of built around to protect or secure or whatever. And what happened in the past is maybe one of the sisters maybe decided to revolt and take over all of the fortresses, and the other 2 sisters had to band together to fight their sibling. But what actually happened is that the aggressor sister was actually being controlled or inspired to act against her own family by her battle mage, who's actually this warlock who's bent on taking over the magic well or whatever is there in the middle of the 3 spires, right? I even had like a dream about this later, where the armies of the 2 righteous sisters, their forces have, some kind of water magic. And when they fight and swing their swords, the swords trace like water trails as if they were like going through water, right? But they're just through the air. They might trail these sheets of water, and maybe the magic water does additional effects in battle. And the evil warlock dude, he's just, he's shadowy evil guy, right? So his forces function off of fear and like mind manipulation and causing nightmares to come out of people's minds into the real world. And maybe his minions and fighters are kind of like a weird take on ninjas. Like they turn into shadows that cross through walls and stuff. I don't know. There's like a whole thing here to develop, and maybe we'll write this up one day as like a D&D world building exercise, and I can put it in my own I'll chunk it out into my world that I've been working on. Well, I haven't worked on it in years, but it's sitting there in the online app that I pay for every year. And maybe we can add it to that. And, I just really like this image of the 3 fortresses that are jutting out of the ocean and using that as a jumping off point for some storytelling. Well, if you made it this far, I hope you got some good hobbying done while I jabbered nonsensically here in the background. And we'll get back to some tabletop related stuff soon. Like I said earlier, there's more weird stuff coming video-wise due to what I have to do work-wise here in the day-to-day life. There's so much going on, and because there's holidays coming up, there's more days I have to figure out. Anyway, it's going to be some weird stuff in the videos coming just for the next few weeks, I guess. Maybe till the end of the year. I don't know. There'll be some tabletop hobby stuff in there for sure, I swear. Some point. I guess if you have a chance to go on vacation, it doesn't matter where, maybe just try to stay laid back about everything. Just roll with what comes and try to pay attention to what's happening in the moment, because that's the real deal. That's life happening. That's the journey, right? Planning and worrying and stressing about hitting deadlines and making appointments on vacation, that's all distraction. Just chill out. Experience the temperature so you can remember it when you're back in the grind. See ya.